Welcome to Fleet Marston. This small dwelling close to Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire has come to prominence recently after it was revealed to hold a dark secret. Previously I made a video on an incredible Roman-era discovery at the site, which included a number of decapitated skeletons and other artefacts. My contention is that these unfortunate bodies may have belonged to suspected vampires. The Romans and other classical civilizations, like the ancient Greeks, believed in entities known as Strix or Strigoi. These mythological beings continued into Slavic folklore as the Strizgia. Archaeologists working alongside railway workers building the new HS2 high-speed rail link in England have unearthed a number of intriguing finds recently. At or close to Fleet Marston, 425 burials were unearthed at a Roman cemetery, but it was the manner in which 40 skeletons were discovered that made me consider a dark possibility. To the Romans, Britannia was a mystical and terrifying place, a land of strange people and rituals, and maybe even giants. Therefore, it is not inconceivable that, in the superstitious mind of the Roman conquerors, there were otherworldly entities abound in this far-flung peripheral part of the empire. And it is with this in mind that the bizarre nature of the burials administered to those 40 skeletons comes into sharp focus. Burial was even more significant in the Bronze and Iron Ages, with grave goods attesting to the idea that the dead were going on a journey. It is clear that the people who buried the 40 bodies were keen to ensure that this would not be a return journey. They were found interred with their heads removed and placed between their legs. Anyone with an understanding of folklore will know that this method of burial is one of the methods by which the vampiric Strix are allegedly prevented from coming back to the land of the living. Obviously, the HS2 archaeologists, perhaps keen to avoid a sensation in their work on the controversial and hugely expensive new rail link, did not allude to the possibility that this was an effective vampire burial. They merely mooted the likelihood that these skeletons belonged to criminals or a type of outcast. It is interesting to note that the use of bells, which were also discovered, was another method of stopping reanimated corpses from returning, as was placing small items near the vampire to make them count them, and so to keep them occupied. A number of these were also found at the site. Other examples of preventative measures against Strix predations include putting rocks in the mouths of the deceased, reburial outside of the village, pinning bodies down with large rocks, and hammering nails or stakes into corpses. A press release issued by HS2 said of the strange burials, "There are several instances of the head being placed between the legs or next to the feet. One interpretation of this burial practice is that it could be the burial of criminals or a type of outcast, although decapitation is well known elsewhere and appears to have been a normal, albeit marginal, burial rite during the late Roman period." I visited the site recently to see how close I could get to the graves. Unfortunately, I could only view and photograph the suspected area through binoculars, but could not get any closer than the surrounding farmland and entrance to the railway works. What I did discover nearby was an abandoned church, the Church of St Mary, which is said to date back to the Anglo-Saxon times. However, it lies on a circular raised area, which lends weight to the possibility that this is a very ancient religious site with a newer church placed on top. Once inside the fairly inaccessible church, I found a font, which is around 700 years old, placed in the small vestry. The rest of the interior was sparse and beset with cobwebs. There were a few scattered gravestones outside the building, which lent the place a rather spooky air. The nearby town of Aylesbury has a long history, once being the Anglo-Saxon site called Aegilsborough. There is some dispute over the etymology of Aegilsburg, with some claiming it derived from the Old English for Churchburg. Was this focus on religion and consecration a folk memory of a darkness that needed to be guarded against? Intriguingly, the Fleet Marston discovery is not the only brush Buckinghamshire has had with alleged vampires. The curious 12th century case of the Buckinghamshire vampire was recorded by William of Newburgh, following an oral account by Stephen, the Archdeacon of the Diocese of Buckinghamshire. The vampire was said to be the restless ghost of a dead man who acted in a vampire-like manner. The entity was not referred to as a vampire because the term was not in the English language until the 18th century. The story goes that the unnamed man died in 1192 somewhere in the county and was properly buried on the eve of Ascension Day. But the night after the burial, the corpse left his grave and visited his wife, leaping upon her while she slept and nearly killing her with the press of his weight. The following night he did the same thing, but on the third night the wife had made preparations and recruited friends to keep a vigil for her. When the vampire, referred to as a revenant, arrived, he was driven away by the loud shouts and cries of the wife and the others. He was said to have then turned his ire on his brothers who lived in the same town. They adopted the same tactic, and so the revenant was forced to target other people while they were asleep, as well as harassing animals at night. Eventually, the creature began to appear during daytime hours, and Archdeacon Stephen was called in. He convened a synod and wrote a letter to St Hugh, the Bishop of Lincoln, asking what should be done. After some theological study, it was found that similar incidents had allegedly taken place in other towns. Learning from the experiences of others, it was said that the corpse had to be dug up and burned, but the archdeacon did not have the stomach for this, so Hugh wrote out an absolution to be placed on the corpse's chest. When the tomb was opened, the body was found to be in a surprising state of preservation. The absolution was laid on the cadaver's chest and the grave was closed. This apparently worked, as the vampire never returned. The part of Buckinghamshire that this incident referred to has not been determined, but one can't help but wonder if this is some oral tale passed down through the ages and embellished through the centuries, but ultimately refers to Fleet Marston in the 1st century. Unfortunately, we will probably never know. That's it for this video. Don't forget to like, share, and most importantly subscribe, and thank you for watching.